And next up, we have Juan.
Thank you, everyone. I just want to say I also work in the settlement field, and I thank Fatima for raising her voice despite everything that her and her family are going through. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Juan Treviño. I am an immigrant. I am a former international student, and I am a settler in Coast Salish lands. I came here in 2016 with an enormous amount of privilege and with no idea of how strongly I would fall in love with the community, the water, the rain, and the forest around here. And also the ferries. I really love the ferries. Thank you for the Musqueam Nation for their warm welcome. I thank Elder Deb, Elder Simpulian for their support. I thank Elder Martin and my fellow YPP members for their love and support. I thank all migrant workers and all the allies that fiercely defend and amplify the voices of the community. And I thank my managers, my coworkers, and my partner for their support. My policy ask is simple, but is very necessary. Canada has to stop all the immigration programs that restrict the employment of people to a specific employer. We need to create fair and reasonable pathways to permanent residence for all those who contribute to our communities, to our economy, and to our cultural wealth. This includes undocumented workers. Canada has a lot to offer, but sadly, it is not offered to everyone. I was extremely lucky to secure my permanent residence in 2021. Granted, it came with an incredible amount of stress and anxiety to which I think all migrants can relate. Today, I am extremely grateful and lucky that I get to support temporary foreign workers who are escaping abuse in my position as a settlement worker with Mosaic's Migrant Workers Program. But to be quite honest, I am exhausted. I am tired of seeing so many suffer at the hands of abusive employers who take advantage of vulnerable people, most of whom come from the Global South. I am tired of people becoming undocumented because they could not find the support to defend themselves from abusive employers. And I am tired of seeing so many undocumented workers paying thousands of dollars to be granted work permits that will further perpetuate their vulnerability, simply to find a way to stay here. What is more concerning, this situation is a direct result of policy decisions that can and should change, and should have changed a long time ago. Migrant workers are essential to Canada, or at least that is what they are told. There are about 240,000 temporary foreign workers in Canada, and the great majority of them have an employer-specific work permit, meaning they can only work for that particular employer. Migrant workers could apply to employment insurance if they lose their job, but their application will most likely be denied. Migrant workers could report unsafe working conditions or a workplace accident, but their report will always come with the risk of retaliation, termination, or deportation. I have myself seen this many times with the people that I support. Migrant workers can leave abusive employers, but not without first proving to an immigration officer through an extremely complicated process that they are actually being abused. And yet, migrant workers are always told that they have the same rights as any Canadian citizen or permanent resident. It is impossible to prevent or significantly mitigate the trauma and exploitative practices that migrant workers in Canada are subjected to without eliminating employer-specific work permits. It is that simple. The open work permit for vulnerable workers is the only existing measure at this time to help workers escape abuse, but this work permit does not necessarily in any way prevent the abuse from happening. Migrant workers could have a master's degree on employment standards laws, and they would still not be able to fully, freely, and safely exercise their rights. Because as long as employer-specific work permits exist, the power imbalance will allow for abusive employers to coerce and manipulate workers in need. And with very poor measures to penalize abuse and exploitation, the risks of denouncing the abuse will always outweigh the benefits of it. Temporary foreign workers know this. What would you do if your employer takes you to another city without your consent to have you work 14-hour shifts without paying anything for months? What would you do if your employer decides to cut your salary, refuses to pay you at all? What would you do if your employer is sexually harassing you and your coworkers? What would you do if your employer, who is also your landlord, decides that you can only be paid $10 an hour? Most of us would probably leave that employer. Migrant workers cannot. Working for an employer that is not listed on their work permit could get them deported, and abusive employers know this. No other resident in Canada is constrained by such inhumane conditions, and I am sure none of us here today would ever want to be restricted in such a way. There are many immediate actions that we could take to protect migrant workers from the current immigration policies that make them vulnerable. But again, this will not eliminate the abuse itself. If we want to address the root cause, the following changes must be implemented. Firstly, employer-specific work permits have to be abolished. Migrant workers who arrived in Canada under the Temporary Foreign Workers Program come from the Global South, and their economic conditions makes them particularly vulnerable. Because of this, many workers will endure an incredible amount of abuse before even trying to reach out for support. That is, if they can't find any support. Many others will become undocumented, and they will fall into an even more precarious situation. Secondly, we must grant permanent residence and have permanent residence pathways that are fair and reasonable. The conditions the migrant workers have to meet to be granted a work permit should be sufficient to be granted a permanent residence. If they have what it takes to work here, they have what it takes to make a life here. Although these policies have to be implemented at the federal level, it is the responsibility of provinces across Canada to call for policy changes that truly protect the human rights of everyone. Migrant workers are essential to our communities, but not only because they build our homes, they grow our food, or they take care of our elder. Migrant workers are essential to Canada because they are part of it, and so are undocumented workers. And a country that fails to grant the same rights to all of those who make it whole cannot claim to have a fair and equal society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juan. And next up,